Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Rogers, and I'm the co-president of Northwestern's chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists. I would like to thank you all for coming out tonight and welcome you to NABJ NU's 4th annual Crain Lecture Series. It is with great enthusiasm that I introduce tonight's guest speaker. I had the pleasure of meeting her at a Chicago Association of Black Journalists event this fall. She was so friendly and encouraging and offering advice to me as a budding journalist. A native to Chicago, the talented individual got her start right here at Medill for her undergrad and graduate degrees. She has worked for the Red Eye, as an on-air contributor for WGN-TV, covering celebrity culture, and as a contributor to the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Tribune, Rap Sheet, and Vibe.com. She is also regularly featured on WBEZ-FM, WVON-AM, WFLD-TV, and CLTV, just to name a few. She currently works at Jet Magazine, teaches class at Columbia College and Northwestern, is the current president of the Chicago chapter of NABJ, and has started an online column and blog called the Kyle's Files. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Kyra Kyles.
Okay. Let's see. So can everybody hear me? All right. Well, good evening, and thank you so much. I'm so impressed that people came out. It's cold outside. I know you probably want to be in the dorm somewhere, so thank you for coming. And I just want to say, I'm not thinking of this necessarily as a lecture. I'm hoping it can be a conversation because I certainly would like to be of help to you guys as you go on in your journalism career. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through, my time here at Northwestern and tell you about, some of the highlights that helped me get to where I am today in the hopes that it can not only help you come up with some questions to ask if you'd like to ask things about your own career or professional goals, but just to give you an overview of all the wonders that are here at Northwestern, which I appreciated then, and I definitely appreciate them now. So I'm just going to talk through it, and afterwards when we have questions, I'm happy to answer anything. And I did bring some cards. I hope I brought enough, but please feel free to email me and reach out because I definitely want to be of help to all of you, and I again appreciate the time. So I'll start out with, at first, I almost didn't even come to Northwestern, which I'm very glad I did not make this mistake. I had gotten into Yale, and I was all excited about going out of state. Then I had to think about it. It is an excellent school, but it really wasn't, the place that you would go to get a journalism degree. So I had to think about that really hard, and I ended up here in Evanston. I was very excited about that. I did print. Now, I don't know how it goes anymore, but at the time you had to declare somewhat of a concentration. So I decided to go with print. I'd always liked writing, even when I was a little girl. My sister and I had a Barbie magazine that we ran out of my dad's office, and we would literally print up, 30 copies of these things and distribute them around the house, and wasted a lot of paper. So don't tell, any of the environmental groups about what we were doing. A lot of paper was wasted. So when I came here, I decided to make my concentration. Do you guys still have concentrations here? Okay. Well, my concentration was sociology, and I think that was a great choice because it really helped me look at societal patterns and trends. I think it's great to be a good writer, and it's certainly important to be precise and to know the mechanics of journalism, but I also think it's important to get an understanding of society and some of the issues that plague us, like racism, sexism, homophobia, things like that, because that, I believe, makes you a better reporter. When you're going out and you're reading and you're noticing things, I think it just gives you a really good framework. So that's what I did. I think that, one of the more important classes that I took was one about inequalities, like social inequalities, and I find that that's really helpful to me today. When I'm thinking about how to cover a subject, it always comes back to my mind. That, in addition to taking some classes within Medill that taught about being sensitive about sources, being careful in your reporting, and also trying not to stereotype people that you're interviewing, because sometimes it can be easy to fall into those patterns. So I do think it's extremely important to think about your concentration and how that can help you with your journalism career. And so I think one other thing that's kind of non-academic that I did that was important was I made sure, now I love all my Medill friends, like we call ourselves the Medill Mafia now, we're not glorifying violence, but that's what we call each other. But we had a great relationship, but I also think it's important to make friends with people outside of the journalism department, because that way you're talking to different people, you're getting different perspectives, and it's not just you kind of formulating this us versus them when it comes to reporters versus regular people. Like, I know some grown reporters that seem to really kind of silo themselves away into this, I'm a reporter and I'm not really a part of larger society. And I think when you do that, that's when you kind of expose yourself to coming across as aloof and not caring about your sources and being more concerned about reporting than you are anything else. And reporting is important, but people are important too. So I went through journalism school, and this is, you know, I'm almost afraid to say this because we're taping and I don't want anyone to send this to my mother, but the way that I ended up in the accelerated master's program is kind of a sordid tale. Now, this is in the prehistoric times when you couldn't do all this digital registering for classes. I actually slept in one day and missed the opportunity to sign up for a news writing class. And this was a class that you needed to graduate. So they told me that I was going to have to do an extra quarter at school. Now, you all don't know my mother, but Tony Kyles is not a joke. And when I heard that, I said, oh, she is going to get me. So at the same time, I kind of miraculously heard about this accelerated master's program. Now, I wanted a master's, but I also thought I could get a master's in my final year, get out of this horrible situation that I put myself in. So I applied to the program, got in, and what I decided to do at that point was I'd already earned the undergraduate print degree to the largest extent. I'd done the teaching newspaper, which, do you guys still do that, where you go and work for the newspaper? So I did that, and I thought it would be good to get a degree in something else so that I could be more of a multimedia journalist. Because in addition to having Barbie magazine, I also, when I was about 3 or 4, I had a TV show that broadcast basically into a dressing room mirror. So don't judge me, you know, this is, you'd use what you have. So I always loved broadcast too, and that was back then considered a little odd. You know, there were people who said, you know, I know what I want to do. I want to be a print reporter. TV reporters aren't very bright. And then the TV reporter said, why would you want to be a print reporter? They're so scruffy and all they do is run around, you know, in the morgues and city news. So there was kind of a rivalry going, and I was bridging the gap because I was the one person that really did want to do both. And so when I joined the master's program, I decided to do the broadcast, which was great. The program took me to Washington, D.C., and I was able to report for a real network affiliate. I basically served as their D.C. correspondent. I got to live downtown, in downtown Chicago for my final year. I was earning my master's as part of a 4-year program. So I think it was great. And the other thing that it did was it gave me the best clips ever. Other people, they had great clips from Northwestern, of course, but I had real life clips showing that I was a correspondent for Washington, D.C., reporting on all these complicated issues. So when I was graduating, I had multiple job offers, and that was great because, you know, I could actually show a news director, yes, I've worked in the field, I know how to turn around a story fast, I can edit, I know how to talk about complex policy and break it down. So that was a really, really great benefit to me to be part of that program. So fast forward, I went into TV reporting. I worked at the Danville Bureau. It was in Champaign, Illinois, and I was kind of off to myself with a cameraman running around. The thing that was great about that is because Northwestern had prepared me to work on my own and be a one-man band, you know, shooting, writing, editing, everything that you need to do, there was no problem. Even though I was in Danville and I was an hour away from the station, I rarely had any problems because I knew how to do everything. I did have a photographer, but if worse came to worse, there was a little digital camera and I was able to take that and use it. So even back then, it was considered a big deal for you to be able to do that. And I think it's funny that today people are starting to say, oh, why do we have to learn this now? And I had to learn this, you know, I won't say when, but, you know, back in the day. I see those posters kind of outed me, so I shouldn't even try to hide, you know, when I was here. But at that time, it was considered different to be able to do all of those things. And I also maintained a foot in the print world. So even though I was a TV reporter, I wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times. And that's another thing that was given to me basically by going to Medill. What happened was a Chicago Sun-Times reporter, Jim DeRogatis, great journalist, had come to our class to lecture about rap music, and we got into kind of a back and forth about hip hop, and he ended up asking me to start freelancing. So while I was a TV reporter, at night I would come home, I would write music reviews, when I was in the city, I would review concerts. So in that way, I was still doing TV, I was doing print, and I also wrote for a magazine. So it was at that time, like I said, it was a lot of work, but I really appreciate it because today it's really helped me with a lot of the multimedia tasks that I'm doing now. And so all that to say, you know, I think that it's an extremely valuable experience to go to Northwestern, but in addition to that, to challenge yourself to do different things. When I was here, some of the extracurriculars that I did, you know, I went on the radio station, worked with the TV station, I wrote for, you know, the newspaper. I think that those things are important, and on top of that, I always tried to make sure that every summer I had an internship. So I didn't want there ever to be a lull. Even though it's great to do kind of the extracurricular activities that are on campus, I also found it was important to do that real world reporting because that's what you can really use to your benefit as a portfolio. So I did leave journalism for a little bit, and that was when I went into corporate communications. I did that for about 4 or 5 years. I worked for PR firms, and at one point it was an investment bank. But that was also good. I still maintained, like I said, I always was writing. So I wrote for the Sun-Times, and then I started writing for, how many people have read the Red Eye before? Very nice. So I was at the Red Eye for, in a freelance capacity for a while. I wrote columns for them. I wrote pieces for them. And they got to a point where they wanted to expand and they wanted to hire me. So it was at that point that I thought, you know, I've done the corporate communications. I have to tell you the truth. It did pay a lot more. But I really loved writing. So it was a hard decision, but I decided to go back into journalism full time, went to the Red Eye, did a lot of things for them, covered pop culture, entertainment. One of the less desirable tasks I had, I used to be the going public columnist, so I wrote about transit. And it was a great experience. I actually won a company award for it, but it meant that I had to ride all the buses and the trains and make observations about how dirty they were and how many pigeons were on this stop, and you know, things got pretty ugly. I once did a story where I had to ride the L at night to see how scary it was. So spoiler alert, it was scary. You know, we don't ever have to do that story again. So I did that. I enjoyed my time at the Red Eye. I also got the opportunity, because of these other things that I'd done in life, being a TV reporter, writing for magazine, doing radio, I got the opportunity to do a weekly appearance for WGN. I did an appearance for CLTV. One of them was called According to Kyra. The other was called The Kyle's Files. I had a column that was mostly about pop culture, kind of dealing with more, I would say, more serious issues like race, as it pertained to pop culture, race, sexism, homophobia. Some of the things I told you that I studied in school, I got the opportunity to write about those through the prism of pop culture. For example, if I were still at the Red Eye, I would probably be writing about Mr. Roland Martin and his unfortunate tweeting on Super Bowl night. Does everybody know what happened there? Yeah, it's not good. So he's taking a little break from CNN right now. But so that's the kind of material that I would kind of engage readers in. And I stayed at the Red Eye for 6 years. It was great, had a wonderful time. And at a certain point, I decided, okay, I'd like a different challenge. So I'm currently at Jet Magazine. And what I do for them is I'm a senior editor. We have another senior editor who's in New York. We kind of split the magazine in half. So I'm in charge of the life, health, the beauty of the week, which is very popular with the young fellas out there sometimes. And I also deal with the sports. So I'm covering those things. And in addition to that, I also get the opportunity to write. And if anyone is friends with me on Facebook, you might have seen that I posted a picture of myself with Eric Benet, who was so cute. And I got the opportunity to interview him and, you know, stare at him for a while. So those are the kinds of things that I do at Jet Magazine. And I'm starting to ramp up again, doing more multimedia, doing TV appearances on behalf of Jet, talking on WBEZ for their month in review segment. So all that to say, I think that the important takeaway is that without someone having to force it upon me or to tell me, you know, you can lose your job if you don't learn these things, I always challenge myself to try different types of media. And I definitely think that Northwestern encouraged that back then, which was forward-looking if you really think about it. And I certainly hope that everybody in the audience is taking advantage of that now. So that is essentially, you know, what I've done. I think the last kind of frontier that I will say I've broken into is my sister and I have written together for a long time, and we recently decided to put our writing skills to beyond journalism and do a web series. So we have a web series. It's called HR The Series. If you look it up on YouTube, it's just all smushed together, one word. and it's basically a sci-fi comedy starring puppets. So kind of random, you know, if you think about the other things that I've done. But that's another thing I think is important for journalists, is to be able to push yourself. As many people know, the creator of The Wire is a journalist, and I think The Wire is one of the best shows I've ever seen. So you can get beyond, you know, journalism. You can do journalism, which is what you love, but in addition to that, you can go into other writing enterprises, which is extremely important. Another thing I think is important about that experience is working on the web. I know a lot of journalists now who are freelancing, and most of them have, even if they're strictly writing, they've got some sort of web presence. They've got a really dynamic website. They do some production of video. So it's important to get out there so that people know what you're capable of. So in short, it's just, you have so many opportunities out there. There's no longer really the excuse of, well, I can't afford a camera, or I can't afford expensive audio equipment. Just like artists do, journalists can make, you know, something out of nothing. You can use these inexpensive technologies to get out there. My sister and I made the web series with our own money. So, and we're going to be doing more things, probably more closely linked to journalism, using the skills that we kind of sharpened up, I would say, through our web series. So in short, you know, take advantage of everything that you can. Expand your mind beyond, you might have a preference, you might like print better, you might like TV better, and that's fine, but to be able to tell an employer that you can do it is much better than, you know, kind of trying to learn something after you take a job or hurriedly before a job interview. So that's pretty much everything that I've experienced, and then the things that I would say are the takeaways. So I would love to open it up if people have questions or, you know, anything at all. I'd be happy to. Yes, I'm sorry, you're gonna come back up? Okay. Sounds wonderful to me. They're like, don't mess with my program. They've got a plan. They don't want me mucking it up, and I apologize for that. Okay. Okay. This one?
I don't know if I'm on, but thank you for the helpful words. I appreciate you coming out.
Of course.
You talked about how your journalism education kind of prepared you for your career path. But what, if anything, you encountered professionally did your education not prepare you for? Like, what did you learn kind of on the fly?
Let's see. You know, I have to say, I mean, I'm not trying to be a Northwestern booster. I can't really think of anything that Northwestern didn't prepare me for. Of course, when you get into any workplace, there are always office politics. You have to learn how to work with different people. I do think that the group projects that we did at Northwestern, that some of the projects I had to do with teammates when I was in DC prepared me for dealing with different personalities and people that work in different ways. But you know, aside from social media, which I would say is fairly new, if you look at it, that's the one thing I think that, because it wasn't even really that prevalent, of course, at that time. So I would say that's the only thing, but the basic principles that I learned at Northwestern really prepared me for using it. You know, for example, going on Twitter, knowing how to, you know, research things before tweeting them out, knowing how to deal and interact with readers, knowing how to post video, things like that. I think that Northwestern prepared me for being able to move into that eventually. So I would just say social media possibly is the only thing.
Okay. And you brought it up at the end of your talk, but
Sure.
the web series.
Yes.
Can you just kind of talk about how that kind of got off the ground and where
Sure.
that idea came from?
Well, the idea came from my sister. She worked at a company where, and sadly, you guys might find yourselves in this position at some time. She went to a company and they started laying people off, but they didn't say anything. There was no announcement like there are going to be layoffs. It was just that somebody would come tap you, you'd go to the human resources department, kind of vanish. You know, your stuff would vanish the next day. So she thought it was so strange that she said, well, maybe it's not that they're being laid off. Maybe they're vanishing into the ether. So we started kicking it around, and she wanted to write it up. So that's originally where the idea came from. And we got it finished, sadly enough, at a time where that's happening more and more, so it kind of fits into the whole Occupy movement and everything that's going on with corporate greed. But that's originally how the idea came about, is that some strange, poorly handled layoffs at my sister's company. So.
Okay. So like you said, you serve as president of the Chicago chapter.
Yes.
Can you just kind of talk about some initiatives you've, as twice elected, am I right?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
Can you just kind of talk about some initiatives you may have kind of want to get behind and kind of the direction you see
Sure.
the organization going in the future?
Well, one of the things I think is there are two things I think are extremely important. One is the mentorship program. We started that initiative a few years ago, and we're about to get it going again, and I encourage anybody here that wants to be involved to do that. One thing that I'd like to do with it that's different than the first time we launched it is I would like it to be more 360. I think that younger journalists have things that they could definitely teach some of the more seasoned journalists, so it's not a one-way street anymore where someone is trying to help you get a job or help you give you job tips. I think there are things with respect to social media, blogging, that some of the younger journalists would be more well-versed on, and also how to use them. So that's one of the key initiatives that I got behind and started. The second thing I think that's important is the social media aspect. It's so important to brand yourself these days. I remember there was a time where if you were a good writer and you got your solid bylines, you were fine. And I've heard from people that there are some TV stations where they want to know how many Twitter followers you have, or they want to know how many Facebook friends you have. So you definitely have to prove that you are engaging with other people. And for you to come to somebody with that knowledge already, I think puts you ahead. So that's something that I want to help the members of all levels, because even if you know technically how to use social media, some people use it irresponsibly, posting photos of themselves, drinking things that, let's just say, are not root beer, and then putting it up on Facebook, or writing, like profanity-ridden rants, things that I think are more etiquette is something that I kind of see people doing at all levels. So we really want to work on how to leverage that, for your brand so that you can get and keep really good jobs within the journalism world.
Okay. I guess how do you use social media personally? Like, what is kind of your MO?
Well, I have a Facebook page, and it's really not a personal page. Like I did not go so far as to turn it into a formal page, but it's really just work related. I still have a lot of fun on it because mostly I'm writing about pop culture, but it's not really any personal observations. Like if I get in an argument with my boyfriend, I'm not putting up, passive aggressive statuses, like nothing like that. So, I use it just pretty much, I see something ridiculous. Like today I posted about the poor little boy with the city sticker. He designed it and they said they saw gang signs and he was just crying. And I was like, what is this, nonsense? So I use it mostly for social commentary. And also if people want to know where my work is, I'm letting them know where it is. And I'm also promoting projects and artists that I like on my page. And I do about the same thing with Twitter. Now, there's occasions where I might write about a jerk chicken place that I like, something like that, but there's nothing, innately, like, super personal there. I think of it more as just a way to interact with readers, not as a way to, get back at my boyfriend for, forgetting Valentine's Day again or something like that, so.
Okay. It's my last question, and then we can open it up.
Oh, sure.
It's, at least to me, it just is like now more than ever, black reporters and journalists have enjoyed kind of like access to mainstream media more than ever. And do you feel like, well, I guess, what do you feel like the role of black journalists is today, and has that changed at all since when you first got in the business?
I think that, first of all, well, I'll tell you a little story that one of my sister's friends, she had a friend, and I will not name any names at all, who my sister was telling her about some of the challenges that I was facing, as an African-American journalist. When I was in Danville, I faced a lot of people with stereotypes. The sheriff of the town at the time asked me if I was Hawaiian because he said he'd never met an African-American that spoke so well and didn't do all this, and I can't even do it, as you can see. So I was like, okay. So I was telling her about that, and she told her friend about it, and the friend said, well, why doesn't she just go work at a black magazine or a black newspaper if she doesn't want to be bothered with that? So that was kind of the attitude, that if you don't like it, then get out. Go somewhere and report only about, black issues. And ironically, I'm at Jet now, but, I guess I did eventually. But I think that, you have a responsibility as a journalist of any sort, of any skin shade, to make sure that things that are kind of under the radar come to the forefront. Otherwise, there's no purpose for you. Everybody talks about how blogs are going to replace journalists, and I really just don't believe that, because, blogs are starting increasingly to report on some of the same things, celebrities, et cetera, things that Us Weekly does very well. And you still have a place for example, the first black mayor of Gary, winning, that kind of thing, first black female mayor. So I think that it's your job to look for those stories that are untold and tell them. And I think when you're African American, you might have an additional responsibility of trying to see if there's something worthy. Now, I don't think anybody here wants to be pigeonholed and you're the keeper of all black news and it's your job to bring all the, the black topics to the forefront, because I don't think anyone wants that. But a good example of an opportunity to weigh in is a while back the Tribune was covering Katrina, and they called me down because they wanted to know if it was offensive to call Hurricane Katrina victims refugees. And I told them, I said, I can't speak for the totality of African Americans and what they would be offended by, but I'll tell you this, I was listening to WGCI, I'm listening to these other stations, and people are finding that offensive. I'm seeing on the blogs that people don't like that. And I think that makes it sound like you're talking about people from a different country rather than your own, fellow American citizens. So I would rethink that. So it's good to have that voice there, because I think when you don't have that voice, that's when you get and I'm not going to say any of these words, but you guys see the French Elle magazine where the editors decided that Michelle Obama and President Barack Obama are exhibiting a white style of dress, and that they don't dress, I guess they were saying ghetto like most African Americans, because it's so clear that they have a lot of knowledge about what African Americans are doing. So that would be an opportunity where they probably wished that someone with some diverse background had been in the room to say, don't do that. This is going to go horribly. So I think there's a value to being in the room and being able to influence, but I don't think you should be responsible for anything that has to do with African Americans. That's where you go, because I think it limits you as a reporter. Like someone was writing on the NABJ. Is anybody on the entertainment listserv for NABJ at all? It's a really good listserv. You might want to get on that if you are interested in entertainment. They also have one for technology if you join the national organization. But there was a long discussion about who's qualified to cover Don Cornelius's death. And there were some people who thought, it has to be an African American, because during the time that Don Cornelius was on the air, it was very segregated and he really broke through. And if you don't know that, and if you never watched the show, you shouldn't be able to do it. And then someone else raised a really excellent point. They said, okay, well, if you do that, then you had better be ready to abdicate all these stories that you might not be thought of as being associated with. So it's a two-way street, especially in this the post-racial world that we supposedly live in. So I definitely think there's a value to being in the room, but at the same time, I would caution people against trying to be the spokesperson, for all that is blackness, because that is not a job that I think any of us, are qualified to do, nor do we probably want. So.
Okay. If anybody in the audience has questions, I know we have a microphone circulating, so if you just throw your hand up, they'll get to you.
Hi, I'm Ashley Williams. I'm in the grad program here at Medill.
Hi.
And kind of in the same conversation, now that you're at JET, do you consider making sure that what you all are reporting on isn't limited to the African American scope, trying to expand? I just find with black publications, kind of trying to walk that border because, there's a lot of conversation of that's why you're losing readership, you're not expansive enough. Has that topic kind of come up since you've been at JET?
Well, I just got there, so it's a little difficult to answer, but that is a good point. They're trying to expand, because you're right. I mean, we're not in the post-racial world. I think we all know that, but neither are we in a world where we're totally segregated, and the only way that you'll find out anything about African-American celebrities is through African-American publications. Now, I don't think we're quite there yet. I have noticed Us Weekly, People, other publications putting Gabrielle Union, for example, in, going beyond just Halle Berry and Zoe Saldana. There was a time when those would be the only, flecks of brown that you would see. I think they're trying to do a better job with that. But because they're not doing the greatest job still, I think there's room there to kind of celebrate what African Americans are doing. And also, we've been trying to branch out into an international scope. For example, we wrote about Nelson Mandela's daughters having a reality show. Now, everybody who watches Real Housewives and all that, silliness, knows that that's probably a breath of fresh air to see people with common sense, on TV. So those are the kinds of areas. I also think there are things that apply to everyone, such as the economy or health. So we do try to hit upon those topics too. But we do, for example, take a spotlight in on certain things. For example, we try to highlight firsts. So like the first, like I mentioned earlier, Gary Mayer, the black female. So I don't see that happening as much as I would like in the mainstream outlets. So I do think there's still a place for that, but I agree that you can't be that closed-minded, or else you will, continue to kind of lose readers. But both Jet and Ebony spiked in circulation recently, so that's good news. It shows that there is definitely a great value to what they're providing.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Jamal Andrus. I am from the University of Missouri. And I'm actually, we have a lot of our NABJ members from the University of Missouri here.
Oh, cool.
So I'm like in charge of that, kind of.
Great.
Anyway, my question is, where did you do your, I guess, small market grunt work type deal?
Oh.
Because everything that I've been told is that, you have to go to a small market and kind of medium market, work your way up, and now you're in
Right.
Chicago. So where did that occur? How was that, for you?
Okay, sure. Well, I started out, I was asked to go somewhere in Florida, but I thought, no, my hair would be a mess and that makeup would be melted onto the floor. So it's kind of a vain thing to say, but I was trying to be on TV, so you don't want to look a mess. But, same for New Orleans. They tried to get me down there. I was like, no. So I ended up in Danville, Illinois, which is 45 minutes away from Champaign. And that's the small market that I started in. And I did have to pay my dues. I was out there with a photographer, running around, covering trials, there was some crazed man who beheaded someone at a gas station. So I did all of that, running around doing that kind of coverage. I think I cheated a little bit because I was writing for the Sun-Times, so even though I was in that small market, I still kind of was building that larger city awareness. So when I would go out for different freelancing jobs, I would get them because they saw, okay, she's working for the Chicago Sun-Times. So that's the way I kind of cheated a little bit to make sure that I could get to a big city sooner rather than later. But that's a great question. And it is hard, just in case, yeah.
Hi, my name is Imani Mixon. I'm a sophomore here at Medill.
Hi.
And I was just wondering, as you contribute to a respected black publication, how do you maintain your neutral journalistic stance while trying to document the black experience?
That's a very good question. Okay. Well, I think you have a target audience. So at the Red Eye, the target audience was 18 to 34. At Jet, the target audience is, people who associate themselves with African American culture. So we definitely are careful. I mean, we're not partisan. There's not, go Democrats, boo to the Republicans, which is what some people might assume would be happening. So we're not doing that. I think that the magazine definitely has a voice because that's the way that you kind of get readers engaged. You don't want to be too blah, so it looks like it's wire copy. But at the same time, I think we're just mindful of who we're trying to target, but at the same time, we're just following the general principles of journalism, which is you definitely want to tell the truth. You want to have balance to stories. If we do a story rounding up the greatest Democrats on the Hill, we've got to do the Republicans on the Hill. We try to do the independent parties as well. So I think that's the way you maintain your fairness and balance, is just richness of sources, which is what I would say you do any publication, no matter what.
Behind you.
Hello, my name is Alexis Rogers. I'm from the University of Missouri. One question that I had was about content and choosing your content. So, especially for entertainment, sometimes, trying to shift through, what's good content and what's bad content. What's your advice for making sure that you have quality content in your work?
Do you mean in terms of picking up stories or reporting? Well, I think the old-fashioned, I like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great. It's a great starting point. Would I report source from Wikipedia? No. And I know some people who think that that's okay now because the blogs are kind of proliferating and everybody wants to be fast. And in order to be fast, you have to kind of cut corners. I find that it's important not to do that. And I think you can kind of tell, my thing is sources say. If I see that, yeah, anybody could do that. Somebody could do that to me, and I wouldn't appreciate it if sources say Kyra's not at Medill right now, that she's, actually downtown at a club. So, I think you have to be mindful of where you're getting your information. And also, it's just reputation. That's why I believe that no matter what, there will always be a place for great journalism, because certain certain outlets have acquired that information. If you hear something from the LA Times or the Tribune or the Sun-Times, you're going to be more willing to believe it than if you see it on some little site where it says sources say or I heard or that kind of thing. So I do think it's difficult because you want to be first. That's important in journalism too. But I think as we're seeing from some of these Twitter deaths, where they just kill somebody off on Twitter like, oh, Bon Jovi is gone. Like, he's not. I think people are starting to learn that, yeah, it sounds good in theory and it goes everywhere, but it's not necessarily the truth. And it's really embarrassing when you find out who is the originator of some of this stuff. So I would just say common sense and your good education at Medill and, everywhere, good journalism schools is important to just remember that.
Thank you.
One more question. I think we have time for.
Hi, I'm Stacy from the University of Missouri. I was just wondering, do you think getting a master's degree is extremely important to your journalism career? I noticed that you got one. I thought that was really awesome. So.
Well, thank you. I think it depends. I'm not going to try to dissuade anybody from getting more education. I think education is great, and if you have the time and the resources to do it, that you should. I would say that it seems to me, based on what I'm finding, is that it's more important if you are interested in education. I'm teaching a class here, as a matter of fact, with the wonderful Jessica. I don't know where Jessica is, but hip hop origins and directions. And that was helpful to me in being able to do that. I love hip hop. That's something I covered for a long time. Having a master's can help you if you are interested in teaching, at any level. I do believe, from what I've seen, is that clips are a little bit more important. So if you have all these degrees and then you have these clips that look like Highlight magazine or Where's Waldo strips, people are going to be able to see through that. So I think there are some careers where you can slip in the door with a bunch of credentials. I think journalism, and I love this about it, is one of the fields where you can't really create that smoke screen. If you don't have writing skills, sourcing skills, research skills, it's really pretty clear. So I'm not saying that you should not get a master's. I definitely think, I know some friends who have decided now that they'd like to go back and get them. But I do believe that I would put my biggest focus on having great clips, getting good relationships with my fellow students and with instructors and people that are working journalists, and focus on that. And then if you decide you want a degree on top of that, that's good. I would not ignore all that, kind of bulldoze through school and then wake up and realize that you don't have the clips that it takes to get the job that you want.
Time is up, but
Okay.
Thank you again. We appreciate you coming out and sharing as much as you can. On behalf of NABJ, Medill, Northwestern, we have a gift for you for your time.
Thank you. This is so sweet. I made the microphone feedback. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So thank you.
Thank you. Great interview. Appreciate it.